When you get those difficult, heavy neurological patients better, it's like there's just no better feeling in the world because their life has changed and it,
Yeah.
it changes your life a little bit too.
Yeah. I've already had about 5 QRA patients under my belt in the last year. I've
Hmm.
had a QRA patient with a occipital decompression surgery, and they shaved the posterior arch off of her C1 as
Yep.
well. And that was an amazing, amazing case, and she's doing way better. I've had
Hmm.
a couple of healed C2 DINS fractures that you can work around, congenital fusions, occipital neuralgia, Meniere's. When you get out of school and you get into this work for the students, like school will teach you these things are rare, but if you're specializing in these and you're advertising, you're putting that into the
They
world,
flock
they're
to
going to
you.
find you.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Expect Miracles podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by uccnearme.com. Find an upper cervical chiropractor near you on uccnearme.com. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm so excited to have him on. Dr. Paul Adams out of Missoula, Montana, at Matt's Family Chiropractic Clinic. He is a phenomenal Blair upper cervical chiropractor, a recent graduate, and a lot has changed in the last 6 to 8 months for him, and I'm so happy for him. We'll jump into that. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Paul Adams. Paul, how are you today, my friend?
Fantastic. Couldn't be any better.
I love that, my friend. So, Paul, what is it that drew you to become an upper cervical chiropractor?
I'd say it was probably only a couple things. One of the main things that I can remember is that I did my undergrad in electrical engineering,
Did
and
you
I did
really?
a yeah, I did a co-op in at a Toyota manufacturing plant, and
Very
so
cool.
it was a lot of specificity, a lot of like measurements down to the millimeter to get the underbody of the car right for launch, and very high quality, very high standards. And so that mindset appealed to me. The work necessarily didn't. So when I moved into the healthcare field and chiropractic, I was already sort of preferential to that kind of idea,
Hmm.
right, or privy to it. And so when I came across upper cervical, and I had, instead of just like letter listings, I had actual measurements, and the analysis was a little bit more fleshed out. It immediately appealed to me, as well as I didn't come from a chiropractic background. I think I got adjusted a year before I started. And so I got adjusted by as many techniques as I possibly could because I found out there wasn't just like two or three, there's like 50 to
Yeah,
200,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know what all these feel like. So it was a very stimulating couple years getting
To say
adjusted.
the least, right?
Right, right. And so upper cervical was kind of the best because I was a little hesitant getting my neck adjusted just because
Hmm.
I didn't have any symptoms. Like
Right.
I don't really have a. I'm kind of odd in that way where I don't really have a chiropractic story or miracle, even though I see them all the time in practice. It's just it felt the best, the least invasive, the most fleshed out, and the community was really, really tight knit and striving, right,
Hmm.
compared to a lot of other chiropractic techniques. So I felt like I felt fit in pretty well.
And
Yeah.
what chose you to switch over to chiropractic and not continue with the electrical engineering?
Well, one of the main things was that I learned pretty quick kind of what the real world was like. We worked about 60 hours a week in the pilot program launching the Lexus that was in the Black Panther movie, the original Black Panther movie. That was the car I worked on.
Very
And
cool.
great car, great car. And I just looked at management and sort of where the end of the
Where the ceiling
road
was?
was,
Yeah.
and those guys looked miserable.
Yeah.
And they didn't like their job. They were overworked. Work life balance was awful. They were not healthy at all.
Uh huh.
And then COVID came towards like the end of my college career and the very beginning of chiropractic school. And so health and fitness and all of these things became a really big focus for everyone globally, right? Because everyone was trying to do the most they could to keep themselves resilient from that interesting time. And so I started to look at these professions and PTs. I saw the same thing, usually, at least in my area in Kentucky where I grew up. But when I went to chiropractic school, I noticed everyone at life was in shape, happy. I tell all my friends they look like Greek gods. I don't know where they came from. You look at my my starting ID, and I was like puffy and inflamed and way fatter,
Hmm.
like going into school, and you just learn all these things about health through it, and it was very empowering. And so you would see the successful docs like yourself and Drew Hall and all these other amazing UC docs, and their work life balance is incredible. They're nice and healthy. They have a positive mental attitude, and they make a good living. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a no brainer. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a way better path.
Yeah. And so, Paul, one thing I applaud you for that I didn't really take into account after graduating was you ended up in a place where it's like you are Montana, my friend. You love the outdoors, you love ranching, you love being in it like that. That's one question I didn't ask myself after chiropractic school. I just kind of found a really solid upper cervical clinic and I dove in. And then 2 or 3 years later, I'm like, damn, I really want to be by the beach and in warm weather. And that's something you found very early. What's that experience been like? Not only doing what you love, but living where you love.
It's been, I mean, it's beautiful, and I wouldn't change how anything that got me to this point, but it was hard.
Yeah,
You have to make, especially coming out of school, you are just in a bad spot
yeah,
financially. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
like you don't have a lot of options.
yeah,
And so, luckily, in school, my main goal was to network as much as I can, visit as many offices as I can, and get my name out so I have the most ability to pivot. That was
yeah,
kind of my big plan. And this office that I shadowed, Matt's Family Chiropractic, 2 years ago. So like after my first year of school, I came up here just for a week in the summer and talked to Scott Matt Sr., who has been practicing over 40 years. He's sent like 50 students to chiropractic school. He's an amazing, amazing man and
he's kind of a
chiropractor.
legend, isn't he? I've met
He
him
is a
once,
living
very
legend.
briefly.
He's amazing, and he's very he's a recluse. He loves nature and his family, so he doesn't do a lot,
Yeah,
And the Blair conferences are during hunting season, so he
yeah,
does not. He's not gonna miss out on killing an elk. But so just that 1 week interaction left that door open for me, and it made it possible to get out here. And for all the students that are listening, try to figure out where you want to live and like manifest it. I know it
mhm,
sounds silly, but I've been talking about bison and Montana and everything since anyone's known me here
mhm.
in life. I won't shut up about it. And it finally happened. And, just there were a couple students who were a little bit surprised that I would spend like $1,000 on flights with my
Yeah,
student loans to go network.
yeah,
But sometimes you got to do that.
yeah.
If you don't have connections, you got to sacrifice and make those connections for yourself because no one's going to do it for you.
I agree, my friend. So, this is your first year in upper cervical practice. What's that been like for you? What cases do you really love taking care of? And as you progress in this field, what are you noticing?
It's been more amazing than I thought it would be, and more challenging than I thought it would be as
Hmm.
well. But that also kind of adds to the satisfaction of the cases that we treat.
Hmm.
And I think most upper cervical chiropractors would agree. And so one of the big things that I noticed, just being very like myopic in school about upper cervical, and I could do Thompson and a little bit of full spine work, but when you join a family practice like Matt's, and we do have CBCT, we do upper cervical and everything, but we see low back pain,
Yeah.
as well, and not all low back pain is from the neck, and so
Hmm.
you kind of have to pivot a little bit. The whole first couple months were honestly less technique stress, but more just managing a patient
Yeah.
and just talking to them and managing their expectations or
Like
communicating.
educating them and walking them through the healing process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
systems, learning different phenotypes of people and how
Yeah.
they love communicating and reading people and being like, no, this person, has no idea what I'm saying right now. So I
Right.
need to,
Pivot
like,
so they
yeah,
understand.
I need to pivot. And so that was a really, really big learning curve was the patient management side. But
Hmm.
I think after a couple months, I got the hang of it. And now, once you kind of, for other students, once you get out of the fog of war of handling a patient, like, and just like the caseload and,
Yeah.
and from start to finish, you get to focus a little bit more on technique. And, I love the Blair work, and I've been, here soon I'll have a little bit more free time to travel, but I've been doing like tutoring sessions with some advanced instructors online for my technique. And it's just, I feel like I'm in a place where I can drill down on the minutia, because the cases that I do see, it's like, if you know the basics, you'll handle like 90-85% of your patients, but it's that one double listing or
Yep.
that side opposite that you need to do that's going to make the
100%.
difference. And in school, I knew that was a thing that was being said, but I didn't see it firsthand. Where if you adjust a patient ARS on C2, but they need a PRI,
Yep.
that's like night and day. And I
Yeah.
did not realize, and I don't know why that makes a difference, but it does.
Yeah. I
And
mean, going back to your electrical engineering, precision, specificity is all the
yeah,
difference in upper cervical.
yeah,
Crazy. And guessing one of the challenges for you is upper cervical. You see a lot of challenging, heavy neurological cases. Is that one of the things you were kind of hinting at?
yeah. And that's been probably one of the most exciting things,
Yeah.
because in Florida, there are a lot of specialists. There are a lot of resources. You can co-manage with a lot. Here in Missoula, there are not a lot of specialists. There's like 2 neurologists within like 300 miles,
Wow.
and they're booked solid. Our
Yep.
orthopedic orthos are booked solid. There's not a lot of vestibular rehab, so there's not a lot of resources.
Right.
So when you're one of the only people who can adjust the neck the way we do, you're busy.
Yeah.
And so I've already had about 5 Chiari patients under my belt in the last year. I've had a Chiari patient with a occipital decompression surgery with they shaved the posterior arch off of her C1 as
Yep.
well. And that was an amazing case, and she's doing way better. I've had a couple of healed C2 DINS fractures that you can work around, congenital fusions, occipital neuralgia, Meniere's. When you get out of school and you get into this work for the students, like, school will teach you these things are rare,
Yeah.
but if you're specializing in these and you're advertising, you're putting that into the
They
world,
flock
they're
to
going to
you.
find you.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot tell you how many congenital vertebra I've seen where they think it's rare, or even lumbosacral transition segments.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many I've broken the news to the patient, like, hey, you have a 6th lumbar.
Yeah.
And that's why you haven't been responding to other chiropractors, right?
Yeah.
Or, you might have Chiari, go get the image, the MRI, the standing MRI, and they have it. And
Yeah.
it's like missed for years. So it's
Yeah.
been really, really fulfilling.
Yeah, and when you get those difficult, heavy neurological patients better, it's like there's just no better feeling in the world because their life has changed, and
Yeah.
it changes your life a little bit too.
Yeah. There's no Instagram comment that can take it away. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah.
No shot.
And Paul, so you have been doing a lot of co-management, and because of what you said, when you are a little bit isolated from other practitioners that you can work with, you kind of have to broaden your scope a little bit.
Yeah.
So not only are you doing upper cervical, but you're working with some other PTs, vestibular
Yeah.
therapists. How is that? How does that all work and tie in together with the care?
That's been a really big change, because I started my career, the first couple months of it, over in Clear Chiropractic in Spokane, which was a straight upper cervical clinic. Amazing staff, amazing doctors. Probably one of the highest levels of clinical expertise I've seen in a while. But here, I have 3 PTs in our basement and some massage therapists that are in the same building, right, that we work with, that are employees. And so I've kind of gotten an amazing glimpse into what are the actual options that some of these patients have. And that's one thing where, if you're especially for the younger students, if you're in the social media space, you're inundated with all of these like critical opinions, or the man in the stands instead of the man in the arena view of like, hey, this is kind of crazy. You shouldn't do
Yeah.
this or shouldn't do that. But no one actually provides you with the full list of what you can do. And, most of the options that these patients have besides a chiropractic adjustment are subpar and mostly subjective, and they kind of miss the mark a little bit. But they do amazing when co-managed with us. Like I'll give you an example, and that's most neck rehab nowadays, right? And we see like icing on the neck, dry needling, which is really, really good. If the muscle is the main mechanism of injury or the main, you know, propagator of the pain, right? That dry needling is going to do amazing for it. It's going to turn it off. But if that muscle is a compensatory action, right, and it's actually being used to stabilize the spine, taking that muscle out of the game is going to flare symptoms up.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of good neck rehab devices. We
Yeah.
have like corticosteroid shots, PLP therapy. That's like very, very. It's in its infancy of utility. Those miss the mark. Those are
Yep.
subjective based on how they shoot it in. They can miss the nerve root. They can miss the site of application easily, and I've seen it in patients where they go in for a nerve block in their suboccipitals. They missed it, so they just
Yeah.
spent $3,000 something dollars. They're waiting 2 weeks for it to kick in when it should have kicked in a week ago, and they're kind of out of luck and they have to wait because they can't keep doing it, right?
Right.
And fears that it will accumulate. Same thing with surgery, right? Same thing with fusions. And so, one of the main things I've learned, and I've become resolute in kind of our role as conservative upper cervical specialists, right, in the management of this area, because one of the amazing docs, Dr. Bearder, and then also some PTs that I follow on Instagram, they went to this giant PT conference months ago, and out of like 150 presentations, there were only like 4 or 5 on the neck. And it's amazing how little there is out there, right, on neck rehab. And we've been saying things that they're figuring out every day. You know, we've been saying for years. So it's kind of come full circle, because if you listen to social media, it's very like, you know, a very different, unrealistic perspective.
Yeah. And it's pretty amazing. I would say about like 15, 20 years ago, everybody was kind of stuck in their bubble, but with all the new information and networking and seminars going on, I feel like a lot of the areas and disciplines are starting to finally work together and come up with some really good solutions for neck care.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I
Amazing.
totally agree. Well, and that's something too I see is the old guard, as far as chiropractors and MDs and all of these are, there's not as much stigma anymore with, like, you know, the younger professionals like PTs and
Right.
naturopaths, MDs and DOs. Like, there's not a lot of issues, and I think that's because, one, like you said, we're exposed to each other more and we learn, but also, you know, you have PTs that are now learning quote unquote grade 5
Yeah.
manipulations, right? You have DOs that there's a resurgence of DO osteopathic manipulations now in schools, just due to the popularity of chiropractic adjustments on these social media platforms. And so we have a really, really unique opportunity this decade to sort of seize the narrative and seize kind of that authoritative role, if we could just be bold enough to do it, because
Yeah.
it can be intimidating to put yourself out there, as you know for
Yeah.
sure, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It
For
really is.
sure. And one thing about upper cervical, which is, there are a lot of PTs doing chiropractic manipulations, and I get so many people that reach out and say, "Hey, can you teach me this?" And you got to be very careful when you're dealing with the upper neck, because there's so much neurology, there's so many ligaments and blood vessels that run through that craniocervical junction. It's not something that you can kind of just put in your tool belt and use
Yeah.
when you want. You got to,
No,
like,
you
a lot
cannot.
of people want to take that weekend course, and it's like you just can't do that with upper cervical.
No, you cannot.
Yeah.
No, you cannot. And I've seen it too. And just as a new doc, you know, you'll mess up an adjustment, just like it's healthcare. We're
Mhm.
human, you know, and so, and you can also see patients who come in from messed up adjustments or messed up shots or, you know, whatever. Even though we are conservative healthcare practitioners, the modalities that we use in our case, the adjustment is like potent. It's like a surgical knife. And so you're right in highlighting the difference where a lot of these PTs, it's a weekend course, right? Versus myself and yourself, this is hundreds of hours of training through 3.5 years of it being the main focus and not an elective, right? And you can go on my Instagram and you can see me hitting a wooden block like Rock Lee from Naruto for like like 3 years ago. Like I have the videos out there, so it's really a passion, and upper cervical chiropractors are in a caliber of our own, and it's nice to hold our standards that way.
Absolutely. And it's every upper cervical doctor, and I'm sure you've seen it with Dr. Matt's, like it's something that you get better and better at. You hone your craft every year, and it's not like being a regular athlete where you have this window of 10 years and you hit your prime and you're done. It's so cool to talk to people that have been doing this for 15, 20 years, and they're like, I'm just getting better and better, and I'm honing in on this craft every year. And that just makes me so happy and thrilled to be part of the upper cervical network, just to, just to get better at your craft every year is just, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, and that's actually an amazing point that I wasn't really thinking about. And whenever I talk to the PTs downstairs, which I love my PTs, they're like some of the coolest guys and girls. They're very, very smart. But when you see kind of the techniques that they do, there is no beginning, intermediate, advanced. Okay, it's like a dry needling seminar where they learn, hey, we're dry needling the thorax, or we're dry needling the neck, or we're rehabbing the neck. There's no like levels to it, if that makes sense. Like for chiropractic, and I'm pretty sure this is really the only niche in chiropractic where you have beginner, intermediate, advanced level instruction with different considerations. And so I think one of the amazing things that I've learned is to not be so critical of like yourself as a physician, because you do get imposter syndrome, and there are some jaded people out there, jaded chiropractors, jaded PTs. They can be very self-critical because it's a lot easier to be hyper critical of your own performance. But then the next step to that, and the next step in that personal audit, is okay, we have this critique, what do we do next? Like what's the next step, what's the plan of action? And so there's very few professions where I kind of see that next step being, like an intermediate seminar, an advanced seminar, upper cervical neurology. These little adjuncts that you can bring into our care is very unique that I don't see in PT, and I don't see that in other professions. And the soft clinical signs that we see as well, something that I came across this week where, we're taught these very subclinical presentations of patients because they don't cross that red line into pathology where MDs would step in. And not a lot of other providers even know those. Like I'll refer a patient with nystagmus or saccades in the eye when looking up to, or like up to the right to a PT. They have all the same functional neurology gear, like the right eye, everything. They'll put them through that. They don't find it, okay, and they don't see it. And then we adjust the upper neck, her eyes stabilize, her blurry vision is gone, her dizziness is gone. They do the right eye, and they're like, oh, well, it's improved, but we didn't find anything. So it's one of those things where you have to be resolute, and you got to be patient-centered first, because just because there's not a blind placebo-controlled trial on this patient,
Right.
I'm not going to stop getting her 80% symptom improvement in the middle of my care just because a right eye software said there isn't anything on there.
For sure. Yeah. And it's such an exciting time to be an upper cervical doctor with the CBC T3D x-rays out, with neck care coming out, and the butterfly test and the joint positioning error.
It's awesome.
The technology is just making it so exciting to be an upper cervical chiropractor and to get the patients the right care, the right adjustment, and get them better too.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, at the end of all my shows, I like to ask all my guests, what is one piece of advice that has really resonated with you over the years that you would like to gift the audience? Could be absolutely anything.
I have a physical and then like a verbal one.
Let's hear it.
Physically, you need to be training your adjustments You need to be taking care of your body and working out. And because when you get into practice and you start adjusting people, you are going to hurt and you're going to hurt yourself. And just luckily, I've been good enough to work around everything. But a lot of my peers who graduated just a little over a year ago have hurt themselves already. So take great care of your body, strength and condition train, all that fun stuff. Train your adjustments, get body work done. And then I'll say verbally, the advice that I got that I've picked up from amazing chiropractors like yourselves is learn how to communicate. We have the philosophical grounding of subluxation and the 33 principles and all of these amazing like rhetorical devices that we can use to educate our patients. There are new and amazing, very, very technical terms that you can learn from docs like, Dr. Josh Silver.
He's coming on next week. I'm so excited.
Yeah, he's amazing. And you can talk to these MDs and these PTs in terms of like proprioceptive deficits and neurological feed forward and feedback mechanisms and subluxation. And you can do it all and just use them. Like, you don't have to stick to one.
Yeah.
You can do both ends, because when you go to Mexico, you probably want to try to at least speak Spanish if they're speaking Spanish to you, right? So if you're talking to an MD, try to throw in some terms.
Yeah.
That's how you get surgical referrals and everything, and that's how I've been able to, and it's been a game changer. It's been amazing.
I love that. And Paul, where can people find you on Instagram, social media, and if they want to book an appointment with you?
Yeah, so they can find me at Montana Chiropractor on Instagram, or they can look up Matt's Family Chiropractic in Missoula. It will be the best clinic in Missoula, so it'll be at the top of the Google search, And so if you want to make an appointment, we'll see if we are a good fit for you and if you're a good fit for us. And just thank you for having me on. I love giving back to the profession. I've listened to this podcast for years, and it's just full circle, and I can't wait to see where we end up in a couple years.
Awesome, Paul. And I would love to have you back on anytime, brother.
Cheers.
Cheers.